You are listening to The Voice of Resilience, How One Teacher Found Her Power in a Foreign Land, written by E. Knoll. Chapter 1, The Classroom Queen. The smell of chalk, warm pan de sal, and a hint of floor wax danced through the corridors of Pag-asa Elementary School. It was 6:43 in the morning, and already, Luisa Salvador was humming Bayan Ko under her breath while pinning up another recycled visual aid. This one a color-coded map of the Philippines made from old Jollibee flyers. "Ma'am Luisa, you're early again," called out Joyce, the school janitress, with a knowing smile. "Joyce, ang agang chismis ha?" Luisa teased, adjusting her reading glasses as she bent over to straighten a row of tiny monoblock chairs. "Di ba dapat ikaw ang mauna?" They both laughed, a small, familiar sound that stitched together the tattered seams of underfunded education and exhausted women doing holy work with empty pockets and full hearts. Luisa was a force in the classroom. She could turn multiplication tables into a clapping game, silence a room with just her eyebrow, and recite Rizal while boiling water on a kerosene stove for the afternoon science experiment. Her students adored her, not because she made things easy, but because she made them feel seen. But there was a crack behind the chalkboard smile. That morning, while the children rehearsed their "Good morning, Ma'am Luisa" in high-pitched chorus, a message blinked on her phone. From Salve, sister. "Nasa bahay na ba si Mang Romy kagabi? Nasa FB si Juvie, sweet sila. Sorry ate, I had to tell you. Nakapublic yung photos, kita mo ba?" Luisa's fingers froze over the screen. Her rosary beads, which she carried like oxygen, peeked from her pocket. She gripped them tight. Yes, she had suspected. Late nights, silent dinners, that cologne he hadn't worn since the 90s suddenly making a comeback. But public photos? That was cruelty dressed in pixels. She tucked her phone into her bag, composed her face, and faced the children. "Okay, class. Sino ang gusto maging tagabasa ng panalangin?" Small hands shot up. Life had to go on. That night, Luisa knelt by her bed, beads in hand, whispering each Hail Mary like a plea stitched in rhythm. Her devotion to the Blessed Mother wasn't inherited. It was earned. Born out of heartbreak, canceled loans, lost pregnancies, and now a husband whose love wandered where it shouldn't. "Mother Mary," she whispered, the light of her side table altar flickering on the plastic flowers. "Give me the grace not to hate him." She messaged Salve. "I saw the photos. Thank you. Please don't tell the kids. Let's talk tomorrow, same time." The next day, life continued as if her own hadn't cracked open the night before. The principal announced an international teaching opportunity at a school in Maryland. Luisa didn't even flinch. America? Now? She walked home that afternoon with grocery bags cutting into her fingers and 1,000 thoughts cutting through her heart. The children were out front waiting for her, her twins, Pio and Lucia, and her eldest, Maribel, with her usual quiet strength. "Mama, may letter para sayo," Maribel said, handing her a large envelope. Inside, a contract, airfare covered, salary figures she'd never imagined in her life. Luisa sat on the worn rattan chair, stunned. For a moment, all she could hear was the distant radio playing Hindi Kita Malilimutan. Chapter 2, Cracks in the Home. It was 9:07 p.m. when Luisa finally found the courage to click on Juvie's Facebook profile. Her hands were trembling, not from cold, but from clarity. Juvie was 20 years younger, a makeup distributor, with that modern kind of confidence that broadcasted every emotion, every new lipstick shade, every moment spent with someone else's husband. There it was, a photo taken at a KTV bar in Naga. Juvie in a black off-shoulder dress, Romy beside her, grinning like he did 20 years ago when he and Luisa first sang Forevermore at a town fiesta. The caption, "When the voice in your life isn't just music, but comfort. Romy and Juvie." She didn't even bother tagging him. She didn't have to. Romy had liked the post himself. Luisa closed her laptop slowly, as if doing it gently would protect her from the ache in her chest. Her children were already asleep, Pio snoring on the couch, Lucia tangled in a blanket beside her open math book, and Maribel curled up with a rosary in hand, having copied her mother's rituals. She looked around at the living room, painted walls chipping, the cross above the door slightly askew, the couch they bought from the palenque in Pili 10 years ago. She whispered a short prayer. Mama Mary, ako na lang po ang masaktan, wag na sila. Then her phone pinged. Salve, sister. Ate, andyan ka ba? Gusto mo ba ako na lang kumausap kay Romy? Luisa typed back. Wag na salve. Hindi worth it ang away. Hindi ko kailangang ipaglaban ang isang taong handang ipagpalit kami. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. At breakfast, she served hot pandesal with sardines and tucked Lucia's collar before her daughter could run out the door. She smiled. She laughed at Pio's corny joke. But as she brushed Maribel's hair, she suddenly said, Anak, kung sakali lang, hypothetically, kung may pagkakataon si Mama magtrabaho sa ibang bansa, anong masasabi mo? Maribel paused, sensing more than her mother intended. I'd say, it's about time you choose yourself, Mama. That evening, while sweeping the yard, Luisa saw Romy's motorcycle lights approach. She didn't say a word as he parked and walked past her like they were nothing more than boardmates. No hug, no eye contact. Inside, he showered and changed, then sat in front of the TV. Wala kang niluto? He said flatly. She walked past him, opened the rice cooker, and set a plate in front of him. Nothing more. The silence between them was now a shared language. And yet, after he had gone to bed, she stared at him from the hallway. How did they get here? Was it slow death, or one careless blow? She opened her phone again. Salve, sister. Kamusta na, ate? She typed. Sis, napaisip ako. Baka tama ka. Baka oras na rin talaga. May offer sa Maryland. Tatanggapin ko na yata. Salve replied immediately. OMG, ate! You should! Don't worry about Romy. Bahala siya sa buhay niya. At andito kami. Kami ang pamilya mo. Hindi mo yan kailangang buhatin mag-isa. Mag-grocery tayo bukas? 9 p.m.? Luisa smiled for the first time that day. Yes. Sorrowful mystery. That night, Luisa opened her laptop. She reread the contract. $58,000 annually. Health insurance. Housing assistance. Visa sponsorship. She whispered, Mama Mary, is this your way of setting me free? And she cried, not because she was broken, but because for the first time in years, she could feel something piecing her back together. Chapter 3. An envelope from afar. The envelope sat on the table like a sleeping volcano, cream-colored, thick, heavy with decisions. The seal read, Gracewood International School, Maryland, USA. Luisa stared at it while stirring the tinola. The chicken bones swirled gently in ginger broth, but her mind was somewhere over the Pacific. Maribel had handed it to her 2 days ago, wide-eyed and suspiciously composed. It came by courier. Ate Lucia signed for it, she said, placing it between the salt shaker and a broken pencil sharpener. Luisa didn't open it right away. She wasn't ready, because inside that envelope wasn't just a contract, it was a question. Do you still believe in new beginnings? That night, after the dishes were done and the twins had gone to bed, she clicked the messenger app on her phone and saw her sister was online. Salve. Ready ka na? Rosary tayo ha. Wag kang tamad. Luisa sent a voice note whispering, Sige na, I'm lighting the candle now. Wag ka munang ichismis ang buong barangay habang nagdadasal tayo ha. The two sisters prayed from opposite ends of the world, one in Camarines Sur, the other on the edge of letting go. Salve recited the Our Father, and Luisa took the Hail Marys. As they reached the sorrowful mysteries, Luisa's voice cracked on the third decade. Jesus is crowned with thorns. She paused. Salve heard it too. At? I'm okay, Luisa lied. She wasn't. Later, she finally opened the envelope. Inside was a full-color brochure of the school, oak trees, bright classrooms, students with laptops, and a faculty page featuring smiling faces of multicultural educators. There was also a personal letter. Dear Ms. Luisa Salvador, we are honored to offer you a teaching position at Gracewood International School for the 2025 to 2026 academic year. Your record of community leadership and classroom innovation stood out powerfully among hundreds of applications. Our diverse student body needs voices like yours. We hope you'll join us in shaping future global citizens. Sincerely, Dr. Catherine Morales, head of school. Her breath caught. Voices like yours. She looked at the kitchen clock. 12:03 a.m. In the corner of the sala, Romy was asleep on the recliner. The TV was still on, flashing muted lights over his face. There was an empty bottle of Red Horse beside him. No good night. No, how was your day? Just the smell of cheap perfume still faint on his shirt. Luisa sat at the table, pen in hand. She signed the acceptance. At breakfast the next day, she placed the envelope back on the table. This time it was sealed with decision. Mama, ano yan? Pio asked through a mouthful of rice. Contract, Maryland, she said, calmly placing her spoon down. Tinanggap ko na. Lucia dropped her fork. Mama! Alis ka? Maribel asked, quiet but firm. Luisa nodded. Opo, baby. Sa umpisa, ako lang muna. Pero susunod kayo. Hindi ko kayo iiwan. The room fell into stunned silence. Then Maribel stood and hugged her. Not tightly, not tearfully, but with the strength of a daughter who knew her mother had carried pain too long. About time, Mama, she whispered. You deserve this. That afternoon, Luisa sent another message to Salvi. May tanong ako, sis. Paano ba magluto ng adobo na pang-despedida? Chapter 4. Tita Celi's Coffee and Courage. The farewell party wasn't extravagant, just how Luisa preferred it. A few plastic tables under the mango tree, blue tarpaulin with "Good luck, Ma'am Louisa," printed in Comic Sans. Trays of lumpiang Shanghai, spaghetti with hot dog slices, chicken in osel, and 3 large basins of rice. Her co-teachers from Pagasa Elementary School came bearing small gifts, crocheted doilies, rosaries, hand-painted mugs that said, "World's Best Teacher." No Romy. He had left early that morning to visit his cousin, which was family code for seeing Lisa. He didn't even text goodbye. Luisa didn't flinch. Not anymore. She posed for pictures, laughed at Mr. Alvarez's corny jokes, and waved at former students who ran to her screaming, "Ma'am Luisa, huwag po kayong aalis!" But her heart was quietly anxious. Beneath the celebration was fear. Fear of planes, of snow, of silence in a foreign kitchen. She was a teacher, yes, but was she enough for America? As the sun began to set and guests thinned out, a gray Vios pulled up. An older woman stepped out in dark sunglasses, a bright pink shawl, and confidence that arrived 3 seconds ahead of her. "Tita Celi!" Luisa called out. They embraced, tight, warm, motherly. "Aba, you didn't tell me you were leaving already, Iha," Tita Celi said, placing a Tupperware of kutsinta on the table. "Akala ko may time pa tayong magchika." Tita Celi had been Luisa's mentor once, during her early years at Pag-asa. She left teaching to migrate to the U.S. in the 90s and had recently returned to the Philippines to retire. "I'm leaving next Friday," Luisa said, motioning her to sit. Scared, excited, medyo both. "Natural lang yan," Celi said, adjusting her shawl like a general preparing for war. "When I first landed in the U.S., I thought snow was soft like cotton. Yun pala parang sinampal ng yelo ang mukha ko. Pero mas masakit pag minamaliit ka dahil sa accent mo." Luisa chuckled, but it hit home. "You'll be lonely. You'll cry in grocery aisles 'cause you can't find patis," Celi continued, sipping lukewarm coffee. "But you'll survive, because you're bringing your roots with you, your rosary, your faith, your strength." Luisa looked at her bag, where her rosary peeked from a side pocket. "You prayed your way through everything, didn't you?" she asked softly. "I prayed and worked like hell," Celi laughed. "But yes, the Blessed Mother kept me sane, and the thought that back home, someone was praying for me too." Luisa felt a lump in her throat. She thought of Salve, her children, her students, and the silence she would soon walk into alone. Before leaving, Tita Celi placed something in her hand. It was an old, worn prayer booklet. The cover read, "Our Lady of the Wayfarers." "Keep it with you," she said. "Not because you're weak, but because even the strong need reminding that they're not alone." Luisa hugged her, this time not as a teacher, but as a daughter in need of courage. That night, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Luisa sat by her window. She opened the prayer booklet and began a new rosary. Her voice trembled at first, but it steadied by the third decade. Outside, the mango leaves rustled. Inside, she whispered, "Blessed Mother, ako na ang aalis, kayo na po ang bahala sa kanila." Chapter 5, Snow, Silence, and Side-Eyes. The first thing that greeted Luisa Salvador at Dulles International Airport was the cold. Not the metaphorical kind she had known from whispered gossip or Romy's neglect, but actual, skin-slapping cold. The kind that crept into her bones and mocked her knitted scarf from Divisoria. She shuffled forward with her luggage cart, bundled in 3 layers of ukay-ukay jackets that smelled faintly of lavender and storage bins. A scarf was wrapped around her ears like a turban. Her breath made little clouds in the air. She looked like a lost bundle of laundry. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you Ms. Luisa Salvador?" a woman asked, holding a sign that read, "Gracewood." Luisa nodded, teeth chattering. "Yes, Poe, yes." The woman smiled awkwardly. "Welcome to Maryland. We've been expecting you." Her temporary housing was a furnished apartment near the school. It was clean, quiet, and white. White walls, white blinds, white light bulbs. It looked like someone had erased all the color of life. She unpacked slowly, placing her rosary on the bedside table first. Then a framed photo of her kids taken during Maribel's graduation. She whispered, "Mama Mary, andito na po tayo." Gracewood International School was impressive. Glass-walled classrooms, smart boards, cafeterias that looked like cafes. The students wore fleece blazers. Everything felt expensive and just a little bit cold. During her first day, she met the faculty. Most were polite, some were warm, but others... "Luisa, is it?" said a tall woman with honey blonde hair. "Where did you teach again? Somewhere in Indonesia?" Philippines, Philippines, Luisa corrected. "Oh, that's nice," the woman said, dragging out the word like chewing gum. "Well, you'll find things different here. We have a certain, academic rigor we maintain." Luisa smiled, the polite kind that Filipinos have mastered when spoken down to. Her classroom was bright, but the students were wary. On her first day, a boy whispered something under his breath, and a ripple of laughter followed. "Excuse me," she said gently. "If you have something to say, you can say it clearly, with courage. That's what I teach." Silence. They hadn't expected that. Luisa knew that look. It was the same look she got when she first wore her mother's old dress to a teaching demo 20 years ago. Half doubt, half dare. She knew she had to prove herself again. During lunch, she sat alone. She picked at her adobo, cold from the walk, and messaged her sister. "Salve, grabe." They all look like they walked out of a Pinterest board. Tapos ako parang naghanap ng remittance center. Salve replied instantly, "Ate, wag mong kalimutan, ikaw ang nagturo sa amin mag-English, remember? Carry mo yan, iba nga sila, but they'll see your worth, eventually. Magdasal ka muna tapos konting lipstick, let's go." Luisa laughed for the first time that day. She looked around. The room was filled with curated smiles and stainless steel thermoses. She pulled out her rosary, quietly mouthed a decade. Then she sat up straighter. That evening, as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, someone called out from behind. "Hey, Miss Salvador?" Luisa turned. It was a younger male teacher, dark curls, olive skin, and a kind smile. He extended a hand. "I'm Alan. I teach world literature next door to you. I just wanted to say, the way you handled that class today? Respect." Luisa's eyes widened. "Thank you, Poe. Thank you. That means a lot." He chuckled. "By the way, no need to say Poe. We're all equals here." She smiled, a little wider this time. Old habit, hard to unlearn. Back inside her apartment, she wrapped herself in a thick blanket and opened a group video chat. Her kids appeared one by one, blurry but glowing. "Ma! Mama! Naka-jacket ka! Kumain ka na?" Luisa wiped a tear. "Hindi ko lang kayo namimiss. Kayo ang lakas ko." They talked for an hour. Homework, neighbors, Salve's new crush. Nothing extraordinary, but everything she needed. After the call, she went to her little altar. The booklet Tita Seeley had given her lay next to the candle. She held her rosary and whispered, "Blessed Mother, thank you for one good thing today." Because sometimes one good thing is enough to keep going. Chapter 6, Allies in the Hallway. It began with a chair. A single plastic chair, stuck under a table leg in Luisa's new classroom, wobbling with every student's fidget. It squeaked during class discussions. It groaned during writing time. By Wednesday, Luisa had had enough. "Excuse me, does anyone know where I can request a replacement chair?" she asked during a faculty break. No one answered, except one, Alan. The literature teacher from next door leaned over and said, "Facilities are slow, but if you write a sticky note in all caps and tape it directly to the chair, they'll move faster than a squirrel in January." Luisa laughed. "I'll try that. Thank you, Poe. Thank you." Alan grinned. "You're doing great, by the way. I've been eavesdropping. You've got a natural rhythm with the kids." "Natural rhythm," she repeated. "You make it sound like I'm dancing." "Maybe you are. You're making them move. That's more than most of us can say." Later that day, in the staff hallway where teachers congregated between periods like caffeinated cats, Luisa was pinning up a Filipino proverb on her bulletin board. "Ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makararating sa paroroonan." "Beautiful," Alan said, peeking over her shoulder. "What's it mean?" Luisa translated, "He who does not look back to where he came from will never reach where he's going." He nodded slowly. "That belongs here, especially for our students." That was the start of something. Over the next few weeks, Alan became Luisa's hallway ally. He'd slip her extra print credits when her account mysteriously locked. He helped her navigate the school's online grading system, which required 7 passwords and 3 security questions just to open the attendance sheet. They didn't talk about personal things. Not yet. But his presence was a quiet balm. He never asked why she wore the same old winter coat every day, or why she always carried a rosary in her pocket. He just respected it. Luisa also began to notice the students softening. Lila, the Haitian girl with braids and battle-ready eyes, stayed after class to ask about her accent. "You talk like my grandma. I like it," she said. "Makes the stories sound safe." Even Alex, the sarcastic boy who once whispered mail order teacher under his breath, now handed in his work with a sheepish nod. One afternoon he lingered. "Ma'am, how come you always talk about your nana in class?" Luisa paused. "Because she's the reason I'm still standing." But not all signs were hopeful. In the faculty lounge, Luisa heard it, snippets of cold laughter, the way people lower their voice, not because they're afraid to be heard, but because they want you to know they're talking about you. "She has a good heart," one teacher said. "Sure, but let's be honest, the kids can't understand her half the time," said another. "And what's with the altar in her corner? This is a school, not a chapel." Luisa entered the room halfway through that comment. She didn't say anything. She just walked to the coffee machine, poured her cup, and left. Later, she sat alone in her classroom, lights off, candle flickering on the corner shelf beside her altar. She messaged Salve, "Sis, minsan kahit ginagawa mo ang tama, may masasabi pa rin ng iba." Salve replied, "Ate, ang mahalaga hindi ka naglalakad mag-isa. May kasama ka, may gumagabay sa'yo. Rosary tayo mamaya, glorious mysteries." Luisa placed her phone down, picked up her rosary, and began to pray. Outside, the hallway buzzed with afternoon chatter. But inside room 205, a quiet resolve was forming. Because Luisa Salvador had learned something over the years. You don't need a crowd to keep going. You just need one good ally, and a God who listens. Chapter 7, Cassandra's Smile. Her name was Cassandra Evans, and her smile was the kind that looked carved in porcelain. Perfect, practiced, polite. She was Gracewood's head of social studies, known for her themed bulletin boards and Pinterest-worthy classroom displays. Her lesson on the American Revolution once made it to the district newsletter. Her students called her Ms. Cass. She called Luisa dear. "Luisa, dear," Cassandra said on their first full conversation, "I just love the way you pronounce heritage. It's got such flavor." Luisa smiled, the way Filipino women do when they're not sure if they've just been complimented or condescended to. At first, Cassandra was kind. She invited Luisa to join a faculty book club. She forwarded old lesson plans you might want to tweak. She even gifted Luisa a mug that read, "Teaching is a work of heart," with a red apple for a handle. Luisa, always gracious, brought cassava cake to the next meeting as a thank you. For a while, it worked. They had lunch together. Cassandra liked to talk, and Luisa liked to listen. Cassandra once told her, "I always wanted to visit Asia. Thailand, maybe, or the islands, where you're from." Luisa politely corrected her. "Philippines." "Oh, right, Cassandra giggled. "They have beaches too, don't they?" The fracture began subtly. It started when Luisa launched a writing project with her class, a short narrative series where students interviewed their immigrant parents or grandparents and wrote about their journeys to America. Alan had encouraged it. "This is the kind of project that makes kids feel seen," he told her. Luisa called it "The Voice Behind the Journey." Within weeks, stories began to pour in. A boy from Ethiopia wrote about his mother's 2 a.m. cleaning job. A girl from Venezuela described the smell of arepas in her grandmother's kitchen while the power flickered during protests. One Korean student revealed that his father hadn't smiled since arriving in the U.S. until he saw his son write about him. Parents began emailing Luisa, thanking her. Some sent voice notes, others cried during conferences. "These stories," one mother said, "no one has ever asked us before." The attention started to grow. An education blog picked up the project and featured her class. A journalist reached out. Even the principal stopped by and said, "Impressive work, Miss Salvador. You're making quite a mark." That's when Cassandra's smile changed. "You know," she said during lunch one day, "your idea for that immigrant storytelling project? It reminds me of something I proposed last year. Remember my unit on Ellis Island? Maybe you saw it and just built off it?" There was no accusation in her voice, but her eyes were sharpening. Luisa blinked. "I actually started from a Filipino custom. Kwentong buhay, personal storytelling. I didn't see your unit. Sorry." "Oh, no worries," Cassandra replied. "Sometimes these things float around unconsciously." That night, Cassandra didn't sit beside her at the book club. The next morning, Luisa's name was removed from the newsletter article draft on innovative classroom projects. It escalated quietly. A week later, Luisa received an email from the school's Excellence Committee. "A concern has been raised regarding the originality and authorship of The Voice Behind the Journey project. We would like to schedule a review conversation next week." She stared at the screen. Her stomach dropped. Alan walked in just as she was about to cry. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked. Luisa showed him the email. He read it, frowned, and muttered, "No, not this." He closed the door. "Listen to me," he said. "She's threatened, Luisa. Your work is real. Hers is curated. Yours is lived." "But what if they believe her?" Luisa asked, voice cracking. "I don't have connections. I only have the work." Alan didn't hesitate, then let the work speak. That night, she called Salve. "Sis, may nagreklamo. Sinasabi niyang hindi daw original yung project ko. Pinalalabas niya na kinopya ko lang." There was silence on the other end. Then Salve replied with the rage of every younger sister who had watched her eldest suffer too long. "Sino yung bruha na yan? Bigyan mo sa akin ang Facebook niya. Gusto mong ako na ang mag-grocery sa harap ng faculty lounge niyo?" Luisa burst out laughing, a short, tight, beautiful laugh. "Salamat, Salve. Bukas pa yung committee meeting. I'll bring everything." "Andun ako in spirit," Salve replied. "At kasama mo si Mama Mary. Yung totoo, hindi peke." The next morning, Luisa stood in front of a panel of 5 administrators and one outside judge, Dr. Maya Garrison, an academic with eyes that looked like they'd read 1,000 papers and seen through 1,000 lies. Cassandra sat nearby, legs crossed, perfectly poised. She presented her claim first. She cited her lesson plan on Ellis Island, her past projects, and suggested Luisa had borrowed the format without knowing. Then it was Luisa's turn. She pulled out handwritten drafts in 3 languages, Voice recordings of interviews, parent emails, copies of journals, photographs of students writing by hand with teary eyes and proud smiles. Dr. Garrison looked up. "Ms. Evans," she said calmly, "can you identify any of the students in Ms. Salvador's project?" Cassandra stammered, "Well, No, I haven't seen the actual papers, just the blog feature." "Did you participate in any of the interviews?" "No." "Do you speak Tagalog, Spanish, or Amharic?" "No." Dr. Garrison leaned back, looked at the rest of the panel, and said, "Then I suggest we let the stories speak for themselves." Chapter 8. Voices They Never Heard. The verdict came the next morning. An email from the Excellence Committee, short and clear. After thorough review, we find no evidence of intellectual misconduct or duplication. Ms. Luisa Salvador's project is an original work rooted in culturally responsive pedagogy and community storytelling. We commend her for her contribution to Gracewood's educational mission. Luisa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for days. She folded her hands, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you, Mama Mary." Then she clicked send on a single reply. "Thank you. May this be a reminder that our stories are not borrowed. They are lived." By the time she entered her classroom, something had shifted. Alex, the formerly snarky student, greeted her with a shy, "Good morning, Ms. Salvador." Lila handed in her revised story with a quiet, "I showed this to my mom." She cried. Even Mr. Reynolds, the notoriously aloof math teacher, passed her in the hallway and said, "Heard you gave a hell of a presentation yesterday. About time we had real stories around here." "Cassandra?" She walked past Luisa in the hallway that afternoon, chin high, jaw tight, heels clicking against the tile. Not a word, just the flash of a forced smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. Luisa didn't respond. She didn't need to. That evening, Luisa stayed late after school. She lit the candle on her tiny desk altar and read through another batch of essays. One story in particular stopped her, a sixth grader named Priya, whose parents had fled political violence in Sri Lanka. "My father was once a teacher like Miss Salvador. But when the soldiers came, he burned all his books because he said they could burn our home, but not our heads." Luisa wiped her eyes. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote, not just lesson plans, not a memo, a real piece. A reflection titled, "The Voices They Never Heard," about stories buried beneath resumes, accents, and zip codes. About students who carried grief in their lunchboxes and parents whose dreams had become silent sacrifices. She submitted it to Teachers of the World, an international journal for educators. She almost didn't, but Salve texted her that night. "Ate, I had a dream. Mama was with you. Tahimik siya, pero proud, like glowing proud." Luisa smiled at her screen. "Parang si Mama yon talaga," she whispered. She clicked submit. A week later, the editor replied, "Ms. Salvador, this is one of the most moving submissions we've received all year. We'd like to feature it in our winter issue and invite you to write a recurring column on immigrant narratives in education." Luisa sat still for a moment. Then she looked up at her altar, where a tiny image of Our Lady of the Wayfarers stood surrounded by dried sampaguita petals. "Is this really happening?" she whispered. Her phone buzzed. "Alan, just read your piece. I'm not crying. You're crying. Seriously, Luisa. It's beautiful. Also, did you just become a published international writer? Because I think you did." The next day, the principal called her in. "We'd like you to present at the district's Multicultural Teaching Summit," he said, smiling in that polite, polished administrator way. "You've sparked something. You've reminded us why we do this." Luisa nodded. But inside, her heart was pounding, not with fear, with fire. Chapter 9. Sabotage in the Staff Room. The staff room smelled of burnt coffee and vanilla hand sanitizer. Luisa had just finished printing handouts for the district's upcoming teaching summit when she heard her name. She wasn't meant to, but Gracewood's copier room had thin walls, and Cassandra Evans had a loud voice. "I mean, it's just frustrating," Cassandra was saying. "I've been here 7 years. 7. And suddenly everyone's fawning over this. This immigrant essayist with her little altar in the corner? There was a murmur of agreement, then a chuckle from someone Luisa couldn't identify. Sure, the stories are nice, another voice chimed in, but it's not like she invented reflection writing. I did that project last semester in a different form. Oh, yes, Cassandra agreed, her voice syrupy. Luisa's very heartfelt, but it's mostly recycled social justice stuff. If I had her sob stories, maybe I'd be published too. The copier beeped. Luisa stepped back from the wall and took a deep breath. Her rosary beads were in her coat pocket. She touched them gently, like armor. The next morning, her classroom was different. Something was off. On her whiteboard, in red dry erase marker, someone had scrawled, "Teach math, not meltdowns." She stared at the words. Her breath caught in her throat. The custodian, Mr. Paul, came in a minute later and froze. "Ms. Salvador, what the hell?" "It's okay," she whispered, already erasing it. "Please don't report it. I can handle this." But she couldn't hide the shake in her hand. Later, during lunch, she found her mug broken in the sink. The same mug Cassandra had given her months ago. The one with the red apple handle. Shattered. She sat at her desk after school, not moving. Her fingers looped around the rosary like a child gripping a mother's hand in a storm. Salve messaged ate. "May naramdaman ako. May nangyari ba? Wala pa akong sinasabi, pero umiiyak ako habang naglalaba." Luisa smiled weakly and replied, "Wala. Basta pagdasal mo ako. At yung mga taong galit sa liwanag." "Sige." "Joyful mysteries tayo mamaya. Buti pa si Mama Mary, walang faculty meeting." That night, Luisa cleaned every desk in her classroom by hand. She didn't cry, she just worked. Quietly, deliberately. And when she reached her altar, she placed a single note there. "They can write over my whiteboard, but they cannot erase what these children now believe about their stories." At the summit, Luisa wore her simplest blouse, a cream barong-inspired top her daughter Maribel had chosen for her before she left the Philippines. As she stepped on stage, she scanned the crowd of educators. Cassandra was there, front row, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Luisa began, "I came here with nothing but 2 suitcases, 1 rosary, and 1,000 stories my students didn't know they were allowed to tell." The room stilled. You cannot measure a child's brilliance by accent. You cannot grade courage. You can only make space for it. And sometimes, that space looks like a quiet room, a notebook, and a teacher who has learned to listen. She read excerpts from her students' essays, one from a boy who had crossed the desert with his father, another from a girl whose grandmother sang her to sleep during air raids. Luisa's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She ended with, "I didn't come here to be impressive. I came to make the invisible seen." The applause was thunderous. Even Cassandra couldn't stop herself from clapping. Afterward, as Luisa packed her papers, Dr. Maya Garrison approached her again. "You remember me?" she said. Luisa nodded. "I do." "Just wanted to say," Maya continued, "there's a publishing house I know. They've been asking me if I know someone who can write the stories we never hear. Would you be open to that?" Luisa blinked. "Are you serious?" "As serious as a good book deal." Luisa smiled. The whiteboard could be erased. The mug could be broken. But the stories, they were fire. Chapter 10. The Investigation. The letter came sealed in a white envelope marked "Urgent, Administrative Complaint Response Requested." Luisa stared at it on her desk for 10 minutes before opening it. Her fingers trembled only once. After that, she folded the paper, set it beside her rosary, and began to pray the sorrowful mysteries. Cassandra Evans hadn't just escalated the issue, she had declared war. "She's exploiting vulnerable students to build a brand," the complaint read. "Her project is emotionally manipulative and mirrors themes I introduced in a prior curriculum. This is plagiarism disguised as empathy." Attached, screenshots from Luisa's blog, snippets from Cassandra's dusty lesson plans, and red ink underlines meant to scream, "See? I said it first!" Luisa blinked slowly. Performative poverty narratives. She'd seen many things in life. Betrayal, silence, the long shadow of poverty. but never the day when truth would be accused of being too dramatic. The hearing was held in a private conference room at the district board office, an off-white space that smelled of polished wood and quiet verdicts. The table was long, dark, and heavy. There were pitchers of water, untouched, microphones built into the desk, folders thick with assumptions. On one end, 5 administrators and Dr. Maya Garrison, this time no longer just an observer, but the swing vote. On the other, Cassandra Evans, immaculate blazer, minimalist jewelry, a thin folder clutched like a shield. And finally, Luisa. She wore her simplest Filipiniana top. No makeup, hair pulled back in a bun, no notes, just her documents and her faith. Ms. Salvador, the lead administrator began, this is not a disciplinary hearing, but an inquiry to clarify concerns. Luisa nodded once. I understand. Her voice, steady, clear, no tremble, not anymore. Cassandra spoke first. She smiled at the panel with the precision of a practiced witness. I want to begin by saying this is not personal, she said almost tenderly. But I believe in academic integrity. My 2021 Ellis Island unit inspired this kind of storytelling. I shared those ideas in faculty lounges. It's disappointing to see a nearly identical structure used without credit, and with such aggressive public promotion. Aggressive public promotion. Luisa blinked. Then Dr. Garrison leaned forward. Ms. Evans, can you name any student who participated in Ms. Salvador's project? Cassandra paused briefly. But I saw the blog posts and the themes were familiar. Can you describe a single story in full? Well, I didn't read the entire essays, just what was quoted. But the framing was... Dr. Garrison cut in, sharp but calm. Ms. Evans, you're accusing someone of intellectual theft, but you can't name the work she supposedly stole? Cassandra flushed slightly. Well, the structure, the tone, the immigrant focus. Another panelist raised an eyebrow. You teach U.S. colonial history. Ms. Salvador's project is grounded in direct student interviews with immigrant families. Yes, but the concept... Dr. Garrison turned to Luisa. Ms. Salvador, please respond. Luisa stood. No notes, no opening statement. Just breathe. She placed 3 items on the table. Her original handout, handwritten in Tagalog and English. Screenshots of a messenger chat with her sister Salve, dated 3 weeks before any blog publication, where she said, Gusto kong magsimula ng kwentong buhay project para sa mga batang hindi naririnig. Signed parental consent forms, written in Amharic, Spanish, Korean, and Tagalog. Then she opened a small leather folder and pulled out a student journal. It was Priya's. She read aloud. My mother used to hum when she cooked during blackouts in Sri Lanka. I didn't know it was to drown out the gunshots. Now I hum when I do homework. Maybe because I miss her. The room was still. Luisa looked up, eyes calm. Ms. Evans teaches dates and battles. I ask students to write what the war left behind. These are not borrowed voices. These are children writing about pain they inherited, pain no textbook ever asked them to remember. She paused. Then, with the grace of a teacher who had once taught barefoot in a flooded classroom, she said, I didn't build this project on another teacher's lesson plan. I built it on trust. I built it by listening. And before I ever asked my students to share their truth, I made sure I was willing to share mine. This isn't branding. This is breathing. Silence. Then a single nod from Dr. Garrison. I believe we've heard enough. 2 days later, the verdict arrived via email. The committee finds no basis for the complaint. Ms. Salvador's project reflects original work, ethical consent, and pedagogical integrity. No further action is required. We commend her commitment to inclusive education. That night, Luisa sat at her altar. She lit a single candle. She took out one folded page, a student's essay from the project, and placed it beside her rosary. The essay read, My mother once told me, even if the world is cold, you must be warm. Otherwise, what's the point of surviving? Luisa closed her eyes. Mama Mary, thank you for the courage not to yell, for the strength to stand without rage, and for the mercy to speak when silence would have been easier. Then a ping. Salve. Ate. May naramdaman ako ulit. Bigla akong napaiyak habang nagsasampay. Tama ba hinala ko? Luisa replied, Tama ka na naman. I'm okay. Panalo tayo. Mama Mary didn't blink. Chapter 11. The Weight of Truth. When the news of the cleared investigation reached the staff lounge, it moved like a quiet wave. No loud cheers, no apologies, just the awkward sound of keyboards tapping and coffee cups clinking against ceramic. Cassandra Evans didn't return to school the next day, or the next. Her name was quietly removed from the spring committee roster. Her themed bulletin board, a collage of historical maps and motivational quotes, was taken down by a teaching assistant who didn't ask questions. No announcements, just absence. Luisa, meanwhile, walked into room 205 the next Monday morning with a renewed calm. She had survived something sacred, being doubted for telling the truth. Her altar now held a new rosary, one sent by her former student from Pag-asa Elementary, who had seen her story shared on Facebook through a mutual contact. Ma'am, nakita ko po yung name niyo online. I told my classmates, that's our teacher. She smiled. This was weight she welcomed. That afternoon, her principal knocked on her classroom door. May I come in? Of course, Luisa said, standing. He didn't sit, just paced slightly, as if what he was about to say had waited too long inside him. I just want to say, he began. I'm sorry. Luisa blinked. I should have stood up for you sooner, he admitted. The moment I heard the gossip, I should have stopped it. I didn't, and that was wrong. She said nothing. He added more softly, but thank you for making us better, not just the students. Us. Luisa finally nodded. Thank you for saying that. He paused at the door. By the way, Dr. Garrison spoke to our superintendent. There's interest in your work going statewide. You might be hearing from the department soon. Luisa laughed, tired, surprised, grateful. Sana po hindi yon dahil lang gusto nilang mag-picture taking, she joked gently. The principal grinned. If it is, make them earn it. That night, her group chat with the kids and Salve was flooded with stickers and gifts. Maribel, eldest daughter. Sabi ko sa'yo, Ma, ikaw ang lodi ng sistema. Lucia, twin number 1. Can you be my teacher too, Ma? I'll fake my birth certificate. Pasok pa ako sa ika-6 na baitang. Pio, twin number 2. Ikaw na ang queen of immigrant storytelling. Salve, rosary tonight. Glorious mysteries. Offer it in Thanksgiving. Wag ka magpakasikat, ate. God lang ang bida. Luisa typed, Amen. Let's offer this one for those who don't yet believe their voice matters. And they prayed, together, in silence, in homes across oceans. A family stitched not just by blood, but by faith. Later that night, she opened her email to find something unexpected. Congratulations, Ms. Salvador. You have been selected as a recipient of the Teachers Who Transform National Award for your outstanding contribution to inclusive education. Attached was a digital badge, a press release, and an invitation to speak at the National Educators Forum in Washington, D.C. Luisa exhaled. Her name, once unknown, once questioned, was now being spoken in rooms she never thought she'd enter. She whispered, Mama Mary, I don't deserve this. But the voice inside her replied, Maybe not, but you were faithful with little, so you were entrusted with more. Chapter 12. The Stage and the Spotlight. The ballroom shimmered with gold uplighting and polished intentions. Name tags glinted under the chandeliers. Banners fluttered with slogans like Empowering Educators for Tomorrow and Voices That Shape the Future. A string quartet played in the background, too soft to enjoy, too loud to ignore. Luisa Salvador stood at the back of the room, her hands damp with nerves, her rosary tucked tightly into her coat pocket like a secret weapon. She had been invited to the National Educators Forum in Washington, D.C., seated beside state superintendents, best-selling authors, and policymakers who drank sparkling water like it was champagne. The printed program listed her name under keynote speaker number 3, Luisa Salvador. The Power of Stories in the Lives of the Invisible. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to run. Instead, she texted Salv. Sister, andito na ako. Hindi ako makahinga. Ang daming may diploma sa accent dito. Salv replied in seconds. Ate, hindi mo kailangang gayahin sila. Sila ang dapat makinig sa'yo. Dasal, tiwala, lipstick. Luisa chuckled and reapplied her favorite shade. Rosy confidence, bought from Watson's before she left the Philippines. Then, she looked in the mirror and said softly, Patahimikin mo po ang puso ko, inay. When the host called her name, applause echoed. Luisa climbed the steps slowly. She stood behind the podium. She adjusted the mic. And for a moment, just a moment, she thought of backing down. But then she touched the rosary in her pocket and spoke. Good evening, I'm Luisa Salvador. I came here carrying more than luggage. I brought with me 20 years of lessons, the quiet hopes of my children, the unspoken dreams of my family, and enough doubt to fill a balikbayan box. Nervous laughter. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to remind you that sometimes brilliance hides in the margins, that a boy who says nothing in class may be translating grief, that a girl who stares out the window is remembering war. The room fell silent. When I started collecting the stories of my immigrant students' families, I didn't know it would lead to awards or invitations. I only knew that someone had to say, you matter, your story matters. So I did. In the Philippines, we have a word, cuento. It means story. But more than that, it means a shared truth. We pass on cuento not to entertain, but to survive, to connect, to honor. Her voice began to tremble. When you teach from your wounds, when you listen with your whole spirit, the classroom becomes more than a room. It becomes a refuge. She paused, then ended with this. The students we fail to hear today become the adults the world fails to understand tomorrow. So let us listen. Let us honor the quiet. Let us make space at the table, not out of charity, but justice. Thunderous applause, not just polite, not just expected. Real. After her talk, Luisa stood at the reception, blinking back the lights in compliments. Powerful words, said a superintendent. I cried, whispered a teacher from Atlanta. Would you consider writing a book? Asked a publishing executive. She smiled, not from pride, but from peace. Then her phone buzzed. Pio, twin number 2. Mama, saw you on YouTube. You were trending in our class. We're all so proud. Maribel, tatay messaged. He saw the video too. No words daw. But I think that says something. Luisa read the message again. Her hands didn't tremble this time. She stood under the spotlight, but her soul was bowed in reverence. Because this moment wasn't about her. It was for every student who hid behind silence, every mother who prayed through storms, every teacher who loved in unseen ways. That night in her hotel room, she laid out her rosary beside the small lamp. She lit a candle and prayed, not for more recognition, not for more stages, but for grace, to stay grounded when she soars, to remain invisible in the work even when the work is seen. She whispered to the Blessed Mother, lead me not to glory, but to mercy. And the light flickered in agreement. Chapter 13, Full Circle. The tricycle ride from the airport to Barangay Filipina was bumpy and familiar. Luisa clutched her bag close, not out of fear, but habit. Inside were 2 things that had followed her across continents, her worn rosary and a single dog-eared copy of her newly published book, The Voice Behind the Journey, Stories from the Margins. She had autographed the front page for herself. Para kay Luisa Salvador, na naniwalang kahit tahimik ang simula, kayang ipaglaban ang tinig. The road home was lined with sari-sari stores and boys playing basketball barefoot on cracked cement. Trapo banners from the last barangay election still hung crookedly from electric lines. And then, just around the corner, was Pag-asa Elementary School. It looked smaller now. The paint had faded, but the laughter of students echoed the same. Luisa stood by the gate, taking it in like a returning soldier. Ma'am Luisa? A teacher she once mentored, Jenny, nearly dropped her bag of fish balls. Ikaw nga ito! Grabe! Ang ganda mo pa rin! Mas payat! Siguro daming snow sa Maryland, no? They hugged tight. Behind them, students stared. One bold kid whispered, "Sino yan, ma'am?" Celebrity. "No," Jenny said proudly. "Mas higit pa. Yan ang nagturo sa akin kung paano magmahal sa klase kahit walang printer at kahit wala ring sweldo sa 3 buwan." Luisa laughed. "Ang dami pa rin bang late na sweldo? Mas mabilis pa rin ang ulan kaysa sa pondo." Some things never change. That weekend, Luisa was invited to speak at a small gathering of local teachers. No press, no chandeliers, just folding chairs, electric fans, and a halo station near the door. She began the talk not with her credentials, but with her story. "I left this place thinking my voice was too soft, too Filipino, too sentimental. But it turns out the world doesn't need louder voices, it needs truer ones." She read a passage from her book, one written by a student named Diego, whose father had once hidden in a shipping container for 3 days, just across a border. "My father didn't want to be famous," Diego wrote. "He just wanted to sleep at night without sirens." Luisa looked up. The room was still. One teacher wiped her eyes with a handkerchief from her bra. Another whispered, "Ma'am, gusto ko pong subukan din sa klase ko." Afterwards, they lined up not for autographs, but for stories. One told her about a student whose mother sells kwek-kwek to fund her review center. Another about a child who writes poems to her OFW father in Dubai. Luisa took them all in, because this was the real award. That night, Luisa walked the old path to her childhood home. The stars were brighter here. On the bamboo bench outside was Salva, waiting with 2 mugs of 3-in-1 coffee. "Ate," she said, "di ba sabi ko sa'yo dati, yung tinig mo, maririnig yan kahit saan." Luisa smiled. "At ikaw rin, Salve. Thank you for being my echo when I forgot how to speak." They clinked mugs. Then Luisa stood and faced the quiet road. She whispered, "Mama Mary, tapos na po ang unang yugto." And the wind, warm and sure, carried her voice back home. Epilogue, a letter to every woman who doubts her voice. Dear you, if you're reading this, maybe your voice is trembling. Maybe you've been overlooked, outvoted, or outshouted so many times. You've started believing silence is your safest home. But I want you to know, your voice is not too soft. Your accent is not too thick. Your pain is not too dramatic. You are not a guest in your own story. Speak. Even if they don't listen yet, speak. Even if your voice shakes, speak. Because one day someone will say, "Because she spoke, I found my voice too." And that day, your story will become someone else's strength. Faithfully, Luisa Salvador. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without the prior written permission of the author, except in the case of brief quotations used in critical articles or reviews. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, or persons living or dead is entirely coincidental. Thanks for listening to Grace and Grit, a YouTube channel where we celebrate faith, the strength behind the silence, the courage and resilience of women, and the triumphs of the human spirit, one story at a time. If you believe in stories that inspire, heal, and make you whisper, "That's me," then hit subscribe and walk with us. Subscribe to Grace and Grit, where every story is sacred,